The house stood at the edge of the Kentucky farmlands, its wooden boards sagging from years of neglect. The shutters banged weakly against the frame whenever the wind passed, and the roof sagged like an old man's back. To those who passed by, it looked abandoned, the kind of place children whispered about during dares. But inside, it was very much alive, alive with pain, silence, and the sound of a little girl's sobs echoing against the walls. Her name was Emily, just 8 years old, though her face bore lines of worry and exhaustion far beyond her years. Her blonde hair clung to her face in messy strands, damp with sweat and tears. She sat on her knees in the center of the wooden floor, a dirty rag clutched between trembling hands. The floorboards beneath her were rough and splintered, biting into her skin every time she shifted. "Keep scrubbing, brat," barked the man looming over her. His name was Jack Miller, though Emily never dared to call him anything. To her, he was only, "sir," a word she used with the tremble of fear that pleased him far too much. Jack was in his late 40s, his beard peppered with gray, his shirt stained from work on the farm. His boots were heavy, caked with dirt, and his hands were calloused from years of labor. But it wasn't the roughness of his body that made him dangerous, it was the darkness in his heart. Emily's small voice quivered. "Please, my arm hurts so much." Jack crouched down, his face inches from hers, his eyes sharp like knives. "Then maybe pain will remind you to do it better." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist so tightly she gasped. He forced her arm back toward the bucket of dirty water beside her. "Dip the rag. Keep going, or you'll regret it." Emily bit her lip to keep from crying out, but tears streamed down her cheeks anyway. She dipped the rag back into the cold, murky water and dragged it across the floor again and again, each motion sending a jolt of pain up her little arm. The room smelled of damp wood and mildew, and the air was heavy with dust. A single window let in thin rays of sunlight, but even that light seemed to dim within these walls. This was Emily's world, scrubbing, cooking, carrying heavy pails of water, and surviving Jack's temper. Jack leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching her like a hawk. "Useless," he muttered. "Always too slow. Always too weak. You're nothing but a burden." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't useless, that she was just a child. But her voice remained trapped inside her chest, drowned by years of fear. Memories of a different life. Sometimes, when the house grew too quiet and Jack stomped outside to work in the fields, Emily would close her eyes and remember another life. A life that felt more like a dream than a memory. She remembered her mother's laughter, the way it filled the room like sunlight, warm and bright. She remembered bedtime stories whispered as she lay tucked beneath soft blankets. She remembered pancakes on Sunday mornings, dripping with syrup. But those memories were fading now, slipping away each time she tried to hold on to them. Her mother was gone. Emily didn't know exactly how or why, only that one day she was there, and the next she wasn't. Jack had stepped in, claiming he was family, though Emily didn't know him before. He became her keeper, her master, her nightmare. The more she scrubbed the floor, the harder it was to remember her mother's face. That scared her more than Jack's anger. Jack's world. Jack's cruelty wasn't born overnight. He had lived his entire life on the farm, watching the world outside change while his own remained stuck. The bitterness inside him grew with each year, failed harvests, unpaid debts, nights spent alone with only whiskey for company. When Emily was left in his care, he saw not a child to love but a tool to use. Her small hands became his cleaning rags, her back his burden to carry, her tears his entertainment. He believed discipline was the only way to raise a child, though what he practiced was far from discipline, it was abuse, plain and merciless. Still, in Jack's twisted mind, he told himself he was teaching her toughness. The endless afternoon. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and still Emily scrubbed. Her little arms shook with exhaustion, her knees bruised from the wooden floor. She winced each time she shifted, but Jack's sharp gaze kept her from pausing. Outside, the sound of cicadas buzzed, a cruel reminder that the world was moving on while she remained trapped. She wondered what other children were doing, laughing, playing, maybe even going to school. Emily had never been to school. She had never sat in a classroom, never raised her hand to answer a question, never made a friend. Her world was this room, this floor, this rag. At one point, she dared to stop, clutching her aching arm. Jack's boot slammed against the floor beside her, making her flinch. "Did I tell you to stop?" he growled. Emily shook her head quickly, eyes wide with terror. "And no, sir." "Then keep scrubbing." She dipped the rag back into the bucket, tears falling into the dirty water, mixing with the grime. Dash dash dash. The whisper of hope. As the day wore on, Emily began humming softly to herself, a tune her mother used to sing. It was faint, barely more than a whisper, but it gave her strength. Jack's ears twitched. What's that noise? Emily froze, her heart pounding. And nothing, sir. Good. Because you've got no reason to sing. Not here. He turned his back and muttered to himself, pouring a drink from a dusty bottle on the counter. Emily lowered her head and scrubbed harder, her tears hidden by her messy hair. Yet deep inside her chest, the little spark of her song remained. A spark she held onto, not knowing that soon, very soon, someone would step through the door and see her suffering. Someone who would change everything. The afternoon sun burned bright outside, its golden rays spilling across the farmland. Inside the wooden house, however, the air was heavy, stale, and dim. Emily's little hands trembled as she dragged the rag back and forth over the warped floorboards. Her arms ached with every motion, and her knees throbbed from hours of kneeling. Jack lounged in a chair now, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his boots propped against the table. He watched Emily with a lazy glare, as if her suffering was nothing more than a passing show to entertain him. You missed a spot, he barked suddenly, pointing to the floor near the door. Emily flinched, quickly crawling to the spot he indicated. Her tiny fingers rubbed the rag across the wood until her skin felt raw. She wanted nothing more than to stop, to let herself collapse on the floor and sleep. But she knew better. Stopping meant punishment. Punishment meant pain. Jack leaned back, taking a long swig of whiskey. Useless, he muttered again. Dash dash dash. Footsteps outside. The sound came softly at first, a crunch of gravel on the path outside. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes darting to the door. Visitors were rare. Almost no one ever came here. Her heart thudded in her chest. Jack frowned, setting down his glass. Stay put, he ordered, though Emily had no strength to move anyway. The doorknob rattled, and slowly, the front door creaked open. Sunlight poured in, blindingly bright after the gloom of the house. A tall man stepped inside, dressed in a spotless white suit that seemed almost to glow in the doorway. His shoes were polished, his posture confident, and his sharp eyes scanned the room with quiet authority. Emily froze, her rag slipping from her fingers. For a moment, she thought she was imagining him, a figure from a dream, sent by her mother's memory. Jack's lip curled. And who the hell are you? The stranger's voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced the room. My name is Richard Carter. I'm here under court order to investigate reports of neglect. He held up a leather folder, flipping it open to show an official badge. And from the look of things, those reports were accurate. Dash dash dash. Confrontation. Jack stood, his face darkening with anger. You've got no right barging into my home like this. This is my property, my child, my rules. Richard's gaze moved to Emily, who was still kneeling on the floor, clutching her sore arm. His eyes softened, but only for a moment. Then he looked back at Jack, his voice hardening. What you're doing to her isn't parenting. It's abuse. And it ends today. Jack laughed bitterly. Abuse? You think I'm abusing her? I'm teaching her discipline. Kids these days grow up spoiled. Not under my roof. She's alive, isn't she? Fed, clothed. What more do you want? Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to cry out, to tell this man in white the truth, but fear kept her silent. What if Jack got worse after he left? What if no one could really save her? Richard crouched down to her level, his expression gentle now. Emily, sweetheart, are you all right? Can you tell me if you've been hurt? Emily opened her mouth, but Jack's shadow loomed over her. His boots thudded against the floor as he stepped closer. She doesn't need to answer you, Jack growled. She knows better than to whine to strangers. Dash dash dash. The tension breaks. Richard rose to his full height, standing toe to toe with Jack. Though Richard wasn't as rugged, his presence filled the room with quiet power. I'll give you one chance, Mr. Miller, Richard said coldly. Step aside. Let me take her, or you'll regret it. Jack sneered. Or what? You gonna fight me in my own house? At that moment, the sound of boots echoed outside. The front door swung wider, and two uniformed sheriff's deputies stepped in, their hands resting on their belts. Jack Miller, one of them announced, you're under arrest for child abuse and unlawful custody. Jack's face twisted with rage. What? You can't arrest me. She's mine to raise. The deputies moved quickly, grabbing his arms as he struggled. Emily shrank back against the wall, terrified by the shouting. You don't know what you're doing. Jack roared, fighting against their grip. She won't survive without me. Richard's voice cut through the chaos. She'll survive because she'll finally be free of you. Dash dash dash. Emily's first step. As Jack was dragged toward the door, he spat curses and threats, his voice fading as the deputies hauled him outside. The house grew quieter with each step they took away, until only the soft sobs of Emily remained. Richard turned back to her. He knelt again, this time slower, gentler, giving her space. "It's all right now, Emily," he said softly. "He can't hurt you anymore." Emily hugged her knees to her chest, trembling. Her mind raced with disbelief. Could it be true? Was it really over? Richard extended a hand, palm open, patient. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. You're safe." For a long moment, Emily stared at his hand. Fear told her not to trust. Fear told her that kindness was just another trick. But deep inside, that little spark she had clung to, her mother's song, her hope, flickered stronger. With trembling fingers, she reached out and placed her tiny hand in his. Richard smiled gently. "That's it. Come with me, Emily. Let's get you somewhere safe." Emily stood slowly, her legs weak from hours on the floor. She stumbled, but Richard steadied her with a firm, reassuring grip. For the first time in years, she felt warmth, safety, and the faintest touch of hope. As he led her toward the open door, sunlight spilled across her face. Emily blinked against the brightness, as if stepping into another world. A world she had never known but always dreamed of. And with each hesitant step, she realized she was leaving behind not just the dark room, but the chains that had bound her. The drive away from the old wooden house was quiet. Emily sat in the backseat of Richard's car, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the fields racing past the window. The world outside looked so big, so alive, so unfamiliar. She hadn't been beyond those walls in years. Richard glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his voice gentle. "Are you hungry, Emily? We can stop and get something to eat if you'd like." Emily didn't answer. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her small shoulders stiff. 1,000 fears swirled inside her. What if Jack came back? What if this was just another trick? What if she ended up somewhere even worse? Richard didn't push her. He simply gave her a small, reassuring smile before focusing back on the road. Dash dash dash. Arrival at the Parker home. It was nearly evening when they pulled into a driveway lined with flowers. A white house stood at the end, its windows glowing warmly against the softening sky. The garden was alive with color, roses, tulips, and daisies swaying in the breeze. Emily's breath caught. She had never seen a house like this, so full of life. On the porch, a woman in her 40s stood waiting, her auburn hair tied back neatly, her apron dusted with flour. Beside her was a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Richard parked the car and opened Emily's door, offering his hand again. She hesitated, then stepped out slowly, clutching her worn dress nervously. "Emily," Richard said softly, "this is Mrs. Parker and Mr. Parker. They'll be taking care of you for now." Mrs. Parker knelt on the porch, her voice warm. "Hello, sweetheart. We've been so excited to meet you. I baked cookies, would you like to try one?" Emily stared at her, wide-eyed, unsure if this kindness was real. She clutched Richard's sleeve, hiding partly behind him. Mr. Parker stepped forward, his tone gentle. "It's all right, Emily. You don't have to be scared. This is your home now, for as long as you need." The word home made Emily's chest tighten. She had almost forgotten what that felt like. Dash dash dash. The first night. That evening, Mrs. Parker showed Emily to a small bedroom painted pale yellow. The bedspread was soft, covered in little daisies, and a stuffed teddy bear sat propped against the pillows. Emily froze in the doorway. The room looked like it belonged to another child, one who laughed, who played, who had never scrubbed floors until her arms bled. Mrs. Parker placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This is yours, Emily. Everything in here belongs to you now. You can decorate it however you like." Emily stepped inside cautiously, running her fingers across the quilt. The fabric was soft, almost too soft, and it made her eyes sting with sudden tears. She turned quickly so no one would see. At dinner, the Parkers served roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and warm rolls. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and comforting. Emily sat at the table, staring at the plate in front of her. "Go on, sweetheart," Mrs. Parker encouraged. "Eat as much as you like." Emily picked up her fork with trembling hands, but before she took a bite, she glanced at Richard nervously. He nodded. "It's all right. You don't need permission here. You can eat." Slowly, Emily took her first bite. The flavors exploded on her tongue, savory, buttery, warm. She hadn't tasted food like this in years. For a moment, she forgot her fear and ate hungrily, but halfway through she stopped, clutching her stomach. Mrs. Parker noticed. Are you full, dear? Emily shook her head quickly, panic rising. I'll finish, I promise. Don't be mad. Mrs. Parker's heart broke. She set down her fork and leaned closer. Oh, Emily, you don't ever have to eat more than you want. No one here will ever be mad at you for that. Emily blinked at her, confused. Jack had always forced her to finish every crumb, no matter how sick it made her. To leave food behind without punishment felt impossible. Richard gave her a reassuring smile. You're safe here. Nightmares. That night, Emily lay in the soft bed, the teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. For the first time in years, she was surrounded by warmth instead of cold. But safety couldn't erase the shadows in her mind. In the darkness, she dreamed of Jack, his booming voice, his heavy boots, his hand gripping her wrist. She woke with a gasp, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mrs. Parker rushed in, kneeling beside her. Shish, sweetheart, it's just a dream. You're safe. Emily sobbed, he's going to find me. He's going to come back. Mrs. Parker hugged her gently, rocking her. No, Emily, he's gone. He can't hurt you anymore. I promise. Emily buried her face in the woman's shoulder, trembling. She wanted to believe it, but fear clung to her like a shadow. Small steps forward. In the days that followed, Emily began to adjust slowly. She learned she could leave food on her plate without punishment. She learned she could laugh, softly at first, without being silenced. She learned she could go outside and play in the garden, her bare feet brushing against the grass, the sun warming her face. One afternoon, Mr. Parker handed her a sketchbook and colored pencils. I hear you like to draw, he said kindly. Emily hesitated, then flipped open the book. She began sketching slowly, a flower, then a tree, then a little house beneath the sky. The Parkers watched quietly, giving her space. For the first time in years, her drawings weren't hidden on scraps of paper. They were hers, celebrated and safe. A visit from Richard. A week later, Richard returned to check on her. Emily spotted his white suit from the window and ran to the door before she could stop herself. Richard, she cried, surprising even herself with the excitement in her voice. He knelt down, smiling. Hello, Emily, how are you doing? She clutched her sketchbook tightly, holding it out to him. I drew this, she said softly. Richard flipped through the pages, his eyes warming. These are beautiful, Emily. You've got real talent. Her cheeks flushed with pride. For once, she didn't feel useless. Richard placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'm proud of you for being so brave. Emily's throat tightened, and she threw her arms around him. For a long time, she didn't let go. A fragile hope. Every night still brought nightmares, but every morning brought something new. Cookies in the kitchen, flowers in the garden, stories at bedtime. Emily wasn't healed, not yet, but the cracks in her heart were beginning to mend. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this really was home.